Hello everybody, my name is Mohit Deshpande, and in this video, before we start getting into some of the more advanced stuff with image processing, we first have to answer a fundamental question, and that is, what are images? So I'm sure you've seen plenty of images when you're browsing the web, or maybe someone sends you an image on your phone, but the question remains, what are images? We see them on our screens, but we don't really quite know what they are yet, so let's take some time to think about this. Images are actually composed of a small singular unit called a pixel. So suppose that this is an image, this is a pixel. It's similar to how a computer program is comprised of just ones and zeros. So fundamentally, we can think of an image as being just a grid of pixel values. And so let me color this one in with something like blue. So inside of our image, if this is our image, then we have a ton of different pixel values, and they're all arranged in this grid sort of pattern where we have rows and columns here. And these singular units called pixels comprise our image, much like how ones and zeros comprise our computer program. So pixels can also have several properties. So this is an example of a pixel, and a pixel, I'm going to write this down, is a fundamental component of an image. Is a pixel, and actually, let me draw an arrow to this. This is an example of a pixel. We use images are just grids of pixels, and we use pixels so that we can display they comprise images. Anyway, let's talk about the pixel itself first. And pixels can have a few characteristics, and I'm just going to list a couple of them. In particular, pixels have color or shade, and the color is kind of self-explanatory. It just tells you what color the pixel is, and that particular pixel in the image. And also, and equally importantly, they have a location in the image. So this pixel is at a particular location in the image, and then it has pixels that surround it as well. In fact, what I mean by position is that we can actually set up like a coordinate system kind of inside this image. And actually the way it works out is that the top left is considered 0, 0, kind of like a coordinate plane, like what you're used to. But in this case, the top left is the origin, so this is x and this is the y direction. And then based on this knowledge, the very first pixel here would then be the pixel at position 0, 0. So 0, comma 0 is this pixel right here. And then we can figure out the rest of the pixels knowing that the top left is the origin. So pixels have these two fundamental things about them. They have color or shade, and they also have location within the image. And the image also has properties as well. So let's talk a little bit about some of the image properties. Particularly, images have characteristics like image size or dimension and image type. So let me write that down. Size or dimension, and then they have image type. And by type, I mean whether it's a PNG or a JPEG or an SVG and so on. So first let's talk a little bit about this size and dimension here. So what I mean by size and dimension is sometimes we can encounter images, and when you open it up, they'll say something like, oh, this image is 1280 by 720 as a common image size. Oops, it should be 720. And let me see if I can make that this look a little better for you here. So 1280 by 720. So sometimes we see images that look like this, and so what does this actually mean? Well, it means that this first portion here represents the width of our image, and this is the height of our image, and this is in pixels. So we measure image size or dimension in pixel values. That's how many pixels are in the width of the image and how many pixels is the height. So we can figure out the total number of pixels by multiplying these two numbers together, and we get a really big number. And intuitively, the more pixels you have, probably the larger the image is, and the higher quality it can encode. And so what I mean by image type is, we're not really going to discuss too much on image type, but I just want to mention what this is. And image type is, as we know, everything on our computer is comprised of ones and zeros. And so images are also files on our computer, and they're also encoded in ones and zeros. So based on the image type, that's how we determine how we can encode image data into ones and zeros. And so PNG does it one way, JPEG does it another way, SVG does it another way, and each different image type kind of has its own different way of encoding this image information. But we're not going to talk too much about that. We're going to be concerned primarily with pixels and then image properties. But anyway, all the things that we've talked about today are things that we can observe just by messing around with images on our computers. However, we want to gain a slightly deeper understanding of what images are, and particularly how we can model them mathematically, because when we can model them mathematically, we can think of image processing as being just a sequence of math operations, and then we can take those math and translate them over to computer code fairly easily. So in the next few videos, we're actually going to see a mathematical construct called a matrix, and that's how we're going to actually encode this image information into a more mathematical context. But let me just recap what we talked about. In this video, we discussed what images are, and I mentioned that they're just kind of a grid of pixels, and a pixel is like the smallest fundamental component of an image. You can kind of think of it like an atom. You just can't break it down any further. And pixels themselves also have properties. They have color or shade, and they also have location within the image. And by location, I mentioned that the origin is actually at the top left of the image, where X goes this way and Y goes this way. Then we talked about what this means. So down here, this image is, when I say an image is 1280 by 720, that's what does that mean I'm actually referring to. Then we talked a little about the image itself, the properties that it has, particularly the dimensions, which refers to this, and the type. And then in the next few videos, we're actually going to discuss a mathematical construct called matrices that will help us better describe images mathematically.